We have seen the utilization, and where there are very legitimate business use cases at other federal agencies, state and local investments in facial biometrics, where potentially that buy-in wasn't part of the process, that messaging wasn't part of the process. And that, frankly, has come back to us, and we continue to see challenges on the program. So I think the key for us in the success early on, and one of the most significant lessons learned is, messaging that broad understanding of what our business use case is and what it isn't. And that is, we have really, oversimplifying it, automated process that has been done manually since the implementation of the Immigration and Naturalization Service. It's identity verification, leveraging the information that's available to us. With technology today, that's actually better than that our officers, and that's based on testing that we did previously.
I kind of characterize TSA's problem as sort of a math problem or a volume problem, right? Travel volumes are going up every year. Now, we had a very, very tragic but useful pause, quite frankly, with the pandemic, where travel volumes went down. We're able to make a lot of changes in the checkpoint, how we handle passengers. But boy, travel's back. There was an article on CNN today. Delta Airlines has the highest reservations of any summer they've ever had this summer coming up. Revenue for the airlines is going through the roof. So travel's back. We've got to look for ways to get more people through the same number of lanes and the same number of checkpoints generally that we always have, because new airports are popping up, all over the place. So I view that as an opportunity, because there is this constant demand for innovation in the airport environment, and we need to adapt. We need to innovate to survive. Otherwise, the lines are going to be untenable. The passengers aren't going to be happy. Our constituents won't be happy. Something else about the airport environment that John hit on earlier is, from a biometric standpoint, it is the ideal use case, in my opinion, for our use case for biometrics, because we control the image capture. You control the background, the lighting, the focal distance from the camera. I mean, you get really, really quality image capture at the checkpoint, and you compare it to quality reference photos that are normally passport photos or some kind of encounter data from CBP, and we get this very, very high match rate. So that's where the airport environment goes in our favor. As I was thinking about this question, it's a good one on the way over here. We've got very, very forward-leaning and very willing partners in airports and airlines. And TSA has very unique authority. I'm a 30-year Coast Guard guy. Nobody ever volunteered to buy me a piece of equipment and donate it to me, right? But the airlines and the airports, they can do it. And we've got really, really good partners that have invested in the latest and greatest technology for their particular terminals, their particular airports, because they think it gives them a competitive advantage. And they'll flat out tell you that a happy passenger is somebody that is easier to deal with on the airplane, and it's somebody that's going to spend more money when they get through the checkpoint in the terminal. Everybody wins. So, all that goes in our favor. And the last thing I'll say about the airports, and this goes to the administration, this current administration, there's an executive order on customer service that's out there, and federal agencies that are very public-facing, and TSA is probably the most public-facing federal agency, except for maybe the IRS, but you actually get to meet us, right? We're supposed to really examine every interaction we have with the public and make sure that the customer experience is factored into that. I went to a great discussion with Raglan back there, the Edge series a couple of weeks ago, over in Tyson's Corner, and it was all about the customer experience and customer service. And this administration really has us laser focused on that. So on a transaction by transaction basis, how can we be a kinder, easier to deal with federal government? And we take that really seriously at TSA. We're the largest consumer of identity in the country, obviously, 2.5 million passengers a day. That's 2.5 million opportunities to either really make a good impression or really make a bad one. And so we focus on that stuff. And this administration is helping us with that.
No, and certainly, the distinctions and the most, impactful distinction between the air environment and similarly with the maritime environment versus the land border environment is the advanced passenger information that we have in the air environment, that we receive the commercial manifest, the passenger biographic data in advance of the aircrafts arriving, and able to build out those galleries, to match for the individuals when they present themselves for identity verification. In the land border, we do not have the luxury of advanced passenger information. And it's that one-to-one scenario now. But having started in the air environment, really, it was the best case scenario, because also you can manage the environment a lot. I'm not going to say it's easy to do it, but it's definitely much more achievable in shorter timeframes to make adjustments to that environment that you have, lighting, the space, the background, versus our land border environments, pedestrians walking up, but also vehicles, which continues to be our focal point in this coming, or I should say for the foreseeable future, capturing usable photos from passengers in vehicles while they're moving, when you're dealing with the glare of the sun, when you're dealing with inclement weather, mud on the windshield, all these different things that play into it. So the lessons learned from the air environment, also with the partnerships, as Austin mentioned, willing partners that certainly through the pandemic, where we saw some hesitancy prior to the pandemic, and really embracing the biometric vision, now are incorporating that into their own modernization practices, which is really important for us, because that really is where the transformation, the true curb to gate vision is going to happen, that buy-in and leveraging the biometrics at, check-in, bag drop. Certainly our partnership with TSA, working together, certainly the investments over the last 2 years, even before that, we've come a really long way, and in that air environment. And then for us, our fundamental process for identity verification hasn't changed, but the air environment and capturing those lessons learned and now being able to apply those, in the land environment, it's been very helpful, though we're still working and plugging away at figuring out and getting matchable photos in the vehicle environment.
One last thing on that point, if I could. I had the opportunity to testify with Wagner back there. He did most of the talking. I think I was just there for appearances. But that's nothing normal, or that's nothing unusual. But one thing he kept pivoting back to, as we were getting questions on privacy, and are you being too invasive with this biometric stuff, and what exactly you're trying to do here as a government? And he would say, these are passport photos. These are people who want to travel. They have willingly provided their biometric information for the purpose of travel. So during the pandemic, again, like I said, it was a very unfortunate, but a fortunate kind of a tactical pause. We looked at the TSA screening process, everything from checkpoint to check baggage security. And we saw where there was an opportunity for disease transmission, right? For COVID transmission. And obviously that's where there's touch and very close proximity. And in very short order, did we really reinvent things at the checkpoint? And it's everything that, you've seen, plexiglass, kind of barricades and whatnot around the officers. It sort of made sense, made communication a little bit difficult, but had to be done. But then there's stuff that you didn't even see. Our friends at Leidos, they had a enhancement package for the AIT machines. Hands over your head, machine rotates around you, the on-person screening. And it was able to cut the false alarm rate down significantly on the 2 versions of the provisions that we have in the field. It cut it down by about 10%. Not really enormous, but that's 10% less times an officer has to touch somebody, and it reduces the possibility of disease transmission. And then, out of the blue, they came up with another algorithm, the low false alarm algorithm, that actually cuts the false alarm rate associated with on-person screening by 50%. That's a huge deal. It's 50% less pat-downs. So when I hear touchless, we always focus on the ID. Do you want to be handing your ID over? Do you want to be biometrically identified? But again, there's more than that. So it's getting us out of the pat-down business any way we can. That low false alarm algorithm is at 650 of your machines now. 300 of them are active. The other ones are waiting on training for, and it's going to go to the rest of the field by the middle of the summer. And we got the money out of the administration. Because it's customer service related, right? And we're decreasing that transactional burden that we have on the public. And then, bag searches. That's another thing where we really think we can go largely touchless. And the new machines in the airport, the computed tomography machines, CT machines, They've got enough material discrimination capability, and we're getting very, very close to prohibited items algorithms where the machine can detect a handgun based on the shape. It can detect a knife. It can detect a grenade. We're really getting close on those things where we might get to a point where the officer will only see what we call image on alarm. And that's if the algorithm sees something in the bag, then the officer gets notified. Otherwise, the bag goes right through. We do it in checked baggage now using CT technology. There's no reason why we can't do it with the checkpoint technology as well. We just need to do a little bit more work there. But like I said earlier, we're really, really focused on cutting down on the amount of actual touching and interaction that we have with the public. I said before, it keeps people a little bit happier. It also speeds things up. We've got that volume problem. More and more people are traveling. We've got to get them through the checkpoint efficiently without sacrificing security. And leveraging technology, we really can do that. And the last thing, touchless. Again, we talk a lot about biometrics, but we've got these new credential authentication technology machines out there where you provide your credential to an officer. They stick it in the machine. It assesses the security features on the credential, and it returns your secure flight status, what level of screening you're supposed to get, and you're directed to the right lane. During the height of COVID, it's like, why be handing these IDs back and forth? We just rotated the machine around. Now it's self-service, like an ATM. I mean, these little things, every time you do something like that, you're reducing that likelihood of disease transmission. Last thing, I've gone on too long on this one. Digital identity. That's coming. Maryland residents, anybody? I know you got your mobile driver's license. You got yours? Have you used it? Did it work? Yes. All right. I always want to risk asking that question. But digital identity is coming. And, we're getting to the point where as states come on board with allowing people to provision their driver's license on their phone, you can give your phone permission to communicate with TSA at the checkpoint. You tap your phone on a device, you're photographed, you're directed to the right level of screening. All that cuts down on the opportunity, all of it enhances the touchless experience, which I think is where everybody wants to go.
And just to add to that, I think where we're building all of our technology, our business practices and models are for just that. And the great work that TSA has done, I benefit certainly from living in Maryland and having the digital driver's license. But that's our model. Passports are not going to be around forever. We don't want to be handing and having that, pass back and forth. It's unnecessary. And, essentially today with simplified arrival, we frankly don't need to see people's passports. There's still some potential for us to ask for them. We still take them. Officers want to see the stamps. Other countries are going to stop using them too. We want to be ahead of that.
So with all the focus on efficiency and removing friction points, when you're looking at the further implementation of touchless screening, what do you assess the overall impact of security and safety on your facilities, the traveling public, and of course your officers? We'll start with that one.
I firmly believe that we can make a better, more seamless, more enjoyable traveling experience and enhance security at the same time by just being really smart about it and leveraging the technology, giving the officers the best tools and training that we possibly can to facilitate the process. I don't find the two to be mutually exclusive at all. As a matter of fact, I go back to Leidos and that low false alarm algorithm. Not only does it have lower false alarms, we find it has better detection. I mean, there's your example right there. It can be done. And it can be done across the screening enterprise.
Look, travel volumes, you heard with respect to Delta, this summer is going to be huge, and it's going to be a number of the carriers really growing. We're going to see kind of the first summer with traffic back more fully from Asia. We're up even through Christmas, we still had some travel restrictions coming out of China. With respect to individuals having to opt out, right? Currently on arrival, it's only U.S. citizens that are allowed to opt out. Since 2004, we've been taking photos and some variation of fingerprints from foreign nationals arriving. We need to get our final rule for exit over the finish line that's been a work in progress for 5 years now. Just a plug for anyone who is familiar with the regulatory process and has any influence maybe in helping us move some of these things along. But leveraging kind of the scope of the whole process in advancing, what that port of the future is going to look like with mobile technology in our officers' hands, speaking to people that we only feel that we need to speak to, or because they have known records, and everyone else moving through an environment. Frankly, we don't have to engage with them at all. Again, leveraging the data that we have, the technology that we have, and the officer skill sets, I think to Austin's point earlier, that's what's really going to be transformational.
Thank you. So digging a little bit more into security, I think for all of us, privacy and data security is always top of mind. It seems that there are daily articles about a data breach here, a data breach there. What efforts are being taken to, make the traveling public confident that their biometric and PII, while being captured, is going to be secured and used and then secured in an efficient and effective way to protect their identities?
Transparency is key, and messaging. And what we have seen is, certainly from the air industry, as well as our cruise passenger partners, is really the technology being embraced, and I mentioned earlier, being incorporated into their own modernization efforts. That is fantastic and great news. But what we've also seen, it almost seems like there's like this annual introduction of a bill to limit the utilization or ban facial biometrics or facial recognition. And I think we've been fortunate that it really hasn't gone anywhere. It seems more symbolic at times, but that doesn't mean that we can not continue to message and, certainly our privacy impact assessments and making sure that they're readily available, that we make sure that all of our stakeholders have access to this information. What we've seen in a small number of places, and frankly, smaller airports where local councils, city councils have limited the ability of the airports to make investments in technology that is related to the facial biometrics, but arming them with the talking points, identity verification at a time and a place where individuals would normally expect to present themselves, and also leveraging the photos that these individuals provided for the purposes of travel. We're not going to win over all the privacy advocacy groups, but we're not going to walk away from trying to engage them and to share those very specific points, but also engage, again, making sure we arm our stakeholders and frankly look to the industry for that engagement with the stakeholders and the local state as well as federal entities that we have to engage with to continue what that messaging is, and making sure that any of our partners that's going to, and I kind of mentioned earlier, right, that kind of is looking to leverage that type of technology, really understands that messaging piece is as critical as the technology piece in the execution.
Austin, would you like to?
Yeah, we're very, very deliberate about what we keep and how long we keep it. I mean, that's and we're very transparent about it, right? But John mentioned before this kind of one-to-one biometric matching capability. That's this credential authentication technology I was talking about. That's your digital identity where you're photographed at the checkpoint. It reads your license off your phone. You're allowed in. That machine only retains any data associated with you until the next passenger steps up. It's flushed. If there's nothing retained, then nothing can be lost, right? The one-to-many or the one-to-few kind of thing that we do at pre-check or international, exit and whatnot with CBP, that data is retained a little bit longer. But again, we're very, very deliberate. And by a little bit longer, I think it's like 12 hours for our stuff. It's very, very minimal, right? And that just reduces the opportunity to even have an accidental, spill of some kind of a thing. And the more we educate people on that, the more we get them comfortable that we really are following very prudent guidelines associated with data retention, the better off we are. And then from an education standpoint, everybody thinks we're bombing people's pictures and information, all over space. But I never really thought about it. When your image is captured, it gets turned into like a mathematical template that you can't reverse engineer your photo out of. That template goes to TVS. it's matched, and you either match or you don't. And the same thing happens in the one-to-one thing. So it's not like we're sending your information all over the place. It's kind of this really useless mathematical formula that translates into what your face looks like, and it's adequate to match you to your reference photo. So you add all that together, and while we have some messaging concerns we got to address, and it comes up about every 3 or 4 months, it seems, kind of like whack-a-mole, you got to talk to somebody else. We've got good answers for all this stuff.
Before we open up the floor to questions, and is there anything that I haven't covered that you would like to leave the audience with, or to prompt some questions?
I think, with respect to the technology, the capabilities out there, we're very excited about, the new deployments that are going to be coming online. It is never the availability of new technology that's slowing us down. It is all of the other, and I think, both Tom and John hit on it, all of the other work that goes with the deployment of new business initiatives, new technology in that acquisition and procurement. And, I think we all play a role, certainly in educating, our legislators on, the importance of moving at the pace and building in the efficiencies into those processes to ensure that we are really meeting the needs of the industry. And when we look at, the prospects of continued growth, and for us, I mean, we talked about, travel quite a bit, but on the cargo side for us as well, moving through efficiently, with regulatory processes is really important.
In terms of keeping your eye on something and being aware of it, and maybe talking about it as you engage with your various stakeholders, the Aviation Security Capital Fund is out there, right? Everybody pays an additional $6 or $7 or something for their ticket. The whole intent of that was to raise the security baseline. The majority of that money gets diverted to deficit reduction. And that's been going on for a while. I think that particular piece of legislation sunsets in 26 or 27 or something like that. But if that money was not going to deficit reduction, we're not even having a conversation about trying to eke out, different technologies in the airports. We'd be buying stuff, innovating as fast as we possibly can. So that's one to maybe ask a question about as you're dealing with folks is what are we doing with that Aviation Capital Fund, and is it going to the right place? I'm going to be perfectly clear here. TVS is a CBP system that we are very, very fortunate that they've given us access to and allowed us to leverage for our particular use case. It's just one of those things where they hit on the right structure, the right system, the right accuracy, the right everything, and that we can now use it for our use case. But I want to thank my partners, Wagner, you're the first one, Diane, of course, here. We'd be nowhere without the TVS system. That was a CBP program. But we're looking at that for a lot. And you put me on the spot here in front of Diane because I haven't quite asked her this yet. But
It's a yes.
It's always yes with you. I love that. But there's a program called Known Crew Member, right? These are the credentialed pilots, flight attendants, all that kind of stuff that go on airplanes. And that's run by A4A, Airlines for America. And it's okay the way they're running it. There's some cyber issues like everybody has that, we're kind of working through, with that particular platform. And we're thinking that perhaps that would be one that TSA could think about taking over at some point. And if we could add that particular population to TVS, and then use TVS as the matching service for Known Crew Member, then it seems at face value it would very easily work. Whether or not it can scale or not, that's something we'd have to talk about. Our 1-to-N, our pre-check pilot, right? That's where it's not 1-to-1, but if you're in Detroit or you're in Atlanta, you step up to an edge device, a camera, you get photographed, and you're matched against a gallery of about 10,000, which is a larger number than we normally deal with. But that's the volume that we expect to see through that checkpoint at that particular time around your flight, expanding that capability nationwide. Delta Airlines, they are really, really on us to take that nationwide for their, for their customers, as are the other airlines as well. Delta's just a little bit ahead on this one. And can TVS scale to do that? TVS, they don't do anything with CBP1, right? That's different.
We do
Why don't you
Collect,
talk about
yeah.
that?
The expansion and there's many business use cases that we're looking at for TVS, and kind of before I mention some of those, we're also experiencing some challenges because sure who's aware of right. So we were authorized up to $1 billion in user fees collected from H&L visas to fund entry-exit, which is supporting the TVS infrastructure. And due to some policy decisions, prior to the pandemic and then ultimately the pandemic, we saw those applications for H&L visas drop considerably. And we've frankly hit the lowest point in terms of the funding for the program. That doesn't mean we're going to start ripping it out of our current, where we're currently using it. But what it is going to do is drive some more restrictive prioritization in expanding it. We do think that the system itself is very scalable with the right funding. So we have to figure out what's going on, with respect to the H's and L's. And look, we've never seen even what was anticipated in the remittances for the H's and L's that we expected in the first few years. But we were doing well, and now that's on a downward trend because of remote work. H's and L visas are work visas for individuals coming to the U.S. that the fee is paid to USCIS, and we would get a portion of that to fund entry-exit. So some challenges with that we're going to have to work on, certainly with our congressional representatives. But the business use cases, we have the land border environment. I know John and the team was looking at this, when they were there. We have travelers that are common travelers across our land border environment. We don't have to have a one-to-one in our land, either vehicle or pedestrian. We have a lot of the same people, students who cross every single day, 5 days a week, people who come for work, business travel. So certainly leveraging it in that space. Working with our air industry partners, again, in those spaces throughout the travel continuum. Biometric boarding from foreign overseas. We've piloted with a handful of different air carriers, again, where we're getting that biometric identity confirmation well in advance of the individuals arriving in the U.S., depending on how long the flight is. But also looking to other opportunities. Now, with TVS and the data retention, I think, something that, we always have to be cognizant of is the authorities that we have and to leverage. So even looking between TSA and DHS, there's some overlap in some authorities, but then there's really some distinct and unique authorities and where and how we can use things. Having the appropriate guardrails, with the information and data utilization in the system is important. But what other industry partners can we work with? We have cruise passengers, right, that just got biometric verification getting off a cruise ship and are now going to be going through a TSA checkpoint, right? How do we connect that? And, then onward, travel. What other folks in the tourism, again, we certainly, I think someone had raised earlier with council, when we get into proprietary utilization for things like lounges, and identity verification for that, we would have a lot more work to do and hurdles to overcome. But certainly with our CBP1 application, leveraging TVS, we do it today with a population of individuals who come across the southwest border that might not have travel documents or the identity documents that have had their identity verified that then are going to travel domestically on an aircraft. And the CBP1 app utilization at the TSA checkpoints to verify that that individual has been identified by a federal authority and is now going to board an aircraft. And what used to happen was we would, at the ports, print up a piece of paper, right, that verified that, the agents and the checkpoints would then have to go make phone calls, automated the entire process. There's many opportunities for business use cases throughout that travel continuum. Certainly leveraging it internally in CBP. We have high value seizures, high risk seizures, where we write by hand in logbooks when we access our seized property vaults. It's ridiculous, right? Because someone forgot to sign their name. We have, cameras installed. We're going to be leveraging it in that space as well. Biometric identification for people who have authority to access, high-risk items in our seized property vaults. There's probably some other federal partners that could leverage that, certainly within DHS and outside of DHS. So, and the opportunity is really kind of endless. The technology isn't going to be the issue, right? And the capability isn't going to be the issue. We could scale it, but it's the funding and then, the determination of the authorities to do it. And, to have the authority, is it regulatory or is it statute? And if it's statute, it's definitely a longer haul at times. Again, regulation should move a lot quicker. Regulatory updates, enhancements, changes than it currently is, but we are where we are.
I'm feeling brave. I haven't told Diane about this one either yet.
It's always yes.
But Real ID's coming, and the compliance rates are going up, but we're going to have a problem no matter when Real ID is actually effective with people showing up at the checkpoint without a Real ID compliant driver's license, okay? They got to have it. And what we're thinking about is, could we possibly consider leveraging TVS to do a passport lookup on the fly? You don't have a Real ID compliant ID? I'm sorry, do you have a passport? Oh, yeah, but I don't have it with me. Well, hold on. Do you mind if I take your picture? Click, looks up the passport. You get the biographics, and you're allowed into the checkpoint. There's all sorts of identity management use cases for TVS that we're going to be working with CBP on. It's a wonderful system. We're very enthusiastic about the potential that e-gates provide. We've got airport partners that really want to invest in them and use them. And the ConOps is exactly like you said. I don't know so much about the fast biometric identification. We have some work to do there. But on a one-to-one basis, particularly for our standard passengers, okay, not pre-check, but our standard passengers that are going to present a credential, you step up to an e-gate, you insert your credential, you're photographed, it matches. We know that you have a flight that day, the gate opens and you go through. It sounds like a ridiculous excuse, but I think you all will feel my pain and understand this. There's cyber issues with e-gates that we got to work through. You wouldn't think it, but even though it's just an end device and it's kind of a standalone thing at the airport, there's cyber hygiene things with the manufacturers that we've just got to work through, and our CIO is working on that. We do have some e-gates that are installed in our lab, the Transportation Systems Integration Facility, the TSIF, over at National Airport, and we're testing them for that kind of utilization. I really do see it in our future. And you'll have one officer, 6 e-gates, and the only time that officer gets involved is when there's an anomaly associated with somebody trying to get through. The multiple biometric identification thing, S&T is diving in on that. They've got a lab over in Maryland, someplace I went to, and it looks really, really promising. 10 of us kind of walking through a sort of checkpoint kind of architecture looking thing all at once, and it's capturing the images correctly and matching us to reference photos that they captured earlier that day. So again, promising we got a little bit more to work to do there, but e-gates are coming. Hey, look, consistency is hard. It's always going to be hard. When you got a 48,000 strong workforce in the field that are generally more entry-level feds, consistency is going to be really rough. Something great is happening right now as we speak, and it's pay parity for TSA. We're a pay-banded system because we were new. It's not the regular GS scale like everybody else. And as a result of that, our more junior people are at times paid up to 30% less than their GS counterparts in another agency. All that's getting fixed. I don't know how the administrator got it done, but he got it done. We got $1 billion in extra budget authority this year to do this pay equity. And what that means is we're going to be able to recruit better, right? Hire more qualified people, and then retain them so that that consistency comes up over time. So I think that we're getting set up to, really make something happen there. I got so excited about pay equity. I had another point to make. What do you got anything to add on this thing?
I do. Give you some time.
Please do.
I think what's really important about the consistency is recognizing that there's a whole lot of entities with skin in the game. in the process, right? That CBP is one part of the ecosystem, throughout the passenger experience or traveler experience, even just crossing the land border. From the bridge authorities to the cruise lines or the airlines, but even just in the federal inspection area. So that, drives a lot of the nuances, to each location. What we have available, right? Where even our global entry is located in terms of the physical footprint that drives these things. But to one of, the efforts that we are really trying to drive, and I'm sure, and maybe not, you've heard of, I mentioned it earlier, CBP One is a public-facing portal. And it's been in the news as of late, with respect to a very small fraction, actually, of the functionality related to processing at the southwest border. But there's a number of public-facing services and functionality for both cargo and passenger. But what we'd like to be able to do, but also in partnership in the air environment in particular, in the cruise environment, is provide information to the travelers, because the consistency, an informed traveler is an efficient traveler. We want an efficient traveler through our process. And the more informed they are about what is going to happen to them, when they come. Now, listen, seasoned travelers, even going through a new airport, it can be a very different experience. But if we can communicate to you either through the industry partners, whether it's the cruise line or the airline, or through the public-facing app because you've signed up for mobile passport control or global entry or whatever, that we can tell you what to expect. But long-term goals for us is just like, and we've learned from our air industry partners, right? You get a text every time your gate changes or if your flight's been delayed. We want to be able to tell you what when booths are still in there, what booth to go to, or at the land border. That's going to be an evolution for us, getting advanced information through the app, what lane to go to, potentially. So that's long term. So two, kind of parallel, yes, trying to drive through consistency, leveraging best practices, and sharing those, as holistically as we can through forums like A4A and ACI, our industry forums here as well, but also providing the best information available to the individual travelers so that, they're not surprised by anything in the process.
Thanks. I got my act together. Technology helps us too, right? Because people will react differently. Two individuals, same scenario, two different reactions. Consistency is just hard, right? But technology, where there isn't, hey, that looks like it might be too big, take it out of your bag. Well, I got to leave it in my bag when I left. Why do I got to take it out now? Little by little things escalate and everybody gets unhappy. But with a CT machine that can definitively identify what the material is, and you don't have to remove it from the bag, everybody wins. So technology will help us there as well.
The idea is building that integrated data package so that every sensor, pre-primary, is tied together, reviewed currently by CBP officers. We're working on AI, and you're tracking that, with respect to the bag, to the vehicle screening, the scans themselves. But to take the data from every sensor, whether it's radiation portal monitors, the RFID readers, the baggage scan, the facial biometric, where we integrate cameras, potentially right where we're doing the x-rays. And that's what we're working on testing now, the placement of those cameras. And what we've seen through our initial tests is that one camera isn't going to do it. We are going to have potentially multiple cameras throughout that process to try and find the best usable photo and integrate all of that information into a data package that we can, frankly, potentially apply AI over, certainly our targeting rules, and leverage that to provide our officers the best information possible that's going to drive the discussion with that traveler or with that commercial vehicle operator. So in Brownsville, we've had great success because we do get advanced data with Truck Manifest, with biographics that we can pull up and build information for facial biometric matching. But once we really do build out, and we have not done it yet, we've looked at the testing, to build out those galleries in the land border environment. Again, getting to where we can tell people what lane to go to. I think our first tests with that are going to be with our Sentry lanes, our trusted traveler lanes. San Ysidro is going to be an interesting environment. And what we've also talked about with respect to the screening technology, does it have to be in the U.S.? Can it be before the boundary line in Mexico? And, line of sight, we're still going to be able to see it potentially. Where is that technology going to be placed? We have ports of entry in Arizona where you literally drive around a wall and you're 5 feet from the primary booth. So that scanning technology is not going to fit in that 5 feet of space.
That'll just about do it. We're right about time, and let's join me in thanking all of